I faced every lake owner's nightmare when the HOA president marched straight onto my dock and told my guests to leave. Her excuse? She claimed the shoreline had shifted onto HOA land. But the only thing that froze that day was her smile when I told her, "This is my private property." The sound of laughter carried across the lake that afternoon, mixing with the smoky scent of burgers and hot dogs drifting from the grill. The water lay still, like a sheet of glass, reflecting the sunlight in sharp flashes that felt almost too perfect to last. My friends were gathered on the lawn, kids chasing each other with sparklers, adults raising cold drinks in lazy toasts. For a moment, life felt untouched, simple, secure, the kind of moment you wish you could freeze in time. But that peace shattered the instant she arrived. The HOA president, Karen Lawson, walked down the narrow trail that divided my land from the association's greenbelt. Her steps were quick, sharp, and full of purpose. She carried a clipboard pressed to her chest like it was a badge of power. Behind her stiff smile, you could feel the weight of something darker: control, entitlement, the belief that whatever she declared would become law. She didn't greet me, didn't wave, didn't even look at the children playing by the dock. She pointed her finger like a referee stopping a game. "Caleb," she said. My name wasn't spoken. It was issued like an order. She told me my guest had to leave. She claimed the shoreline had shifted, that the water's edge had crept up and swallowed my property, pulling my dock, my picnic table, and even part of my lawn into HOA territory. In her mind, in that one sentence, decades of history were erased. Everything I had inherited, everything my grandfather had taught me to protect, now belonged to them. And for just a second, I said nothing. I didn't shout, didn't argue. I just looked at her. It was that gaze, the kind you hold when anger and sadness mix, when the silence says more than words ever could. Inside, I felt the weight of my grandfather's voice echoing across years. He once told me, "People will always try to take what is beautiful. Stand firm, Caleb. The line is the line." That line wasn't just about dirt or water. It was about knowing who you are and where you stand. My eyes fell for a moment on the old oak tree that marked the corner of my property, its roots wrapping deep into the earth like fingers clinging to memory. My grandfather had shown me that tree as a boy. He told me it would always stand as proof, as witness. That tree was more than wood and leaves. It was a boundary, a symbol of truth that would return before this fight was over. So when Karen smirked and lifted her clipboard, I finally spoke. "This is my land." Her smile froze, and for the first time, her certainty cracked. The truth is, I've never been the type of man who loves conflict. I prefer facts. I studied water law for a reason. It deals in records, deeds, surveys, things you can prove. But that afternoon, as the kids fell silent and my guests exchanged nervous glances, I realized this wasn't going to be a polite disagreement. This wasn't about rain or erosion. It was about control, intimidation, and the quiet theft of something precious. Standing there, I could feel the beginning of a storm that wasn't in the sky but in the air between us. The smell of charcoal clung to the breeze, but underneath it, there was something bitter, something that hinted this day would mark a dividing line in my life. Karen didn't leave it at words. She raised her phone, announcing a compliance check, as if she were a police officer and not just a neighbor with a title. Children froze mid-laugh. A kayak bumped against my dock. One of the moms pulled her child closer. My best friend Nate, an ex-Marine with a calm presence that can silence a room, set the grill tongs down. The metal clinked against the plate, sharp as a warning. Even old Evan Pike, my grandfather's friend and a seasoned surveyor, lowered his drink and fixed his eyes on her. Everyone felt it, the air shift, the peace collapse. There's a kind of pain that doesn't show in tears or shouting. It shows in the stillness, in the way your chest tightens when someone threatens the very place that holds your memories. That was my gaze moment. Silent, heavy, telling Karen everything she refused to hear. She tapped her pen against the clipboard, repeating her claim that my land was no longer mine. She said the shoreline had moved, that nature had redrawn the boundaries. But I knew better. I knew the difference between slow buildup and sudden erosion, between a river's law and a lake's. Her words were nothing but borrowed jargon, twisted to justify greed. Still, I let her speak. I let her finish her performance because I knew what she didn't. I had the records, the surveys, the truth on my side. And while anger burned in my chest, I held it back. Because anger can betray you, facts can't. In that moment, looking at the oak tree, hearing my grandfather's voice in memory, I felt both the shadow of loss and the first spark of rebirth. Loss, because I knew this fight would cost me peace, time, maybe even friendships. Rebirth, because this was the moment I stopped being just a lake owner enjoying a holiday barbecue. This was the moment I became the defender of a legacy. The sky above was a bright blue, but to me, it might as well have been clouded with thunder. Karen Lawson walked back up the trail with her head held high, convinced her friendly warning had set things in motion. But all it really did was light the fuse of a conflict she would come to regret. That was the beginning. I didn't know then about the nails hidden in the trail, waiting like traps for bare feet. I didn't know about the bleach poured on my dock, the drone buzzing above my water, or the fake survey pin hammered into the earth to rewrite history. But I felt it, even before the proof came. The lake spoke to me in whispers, and that day it told me something was wrong. And that's when I understood. This wasn't just about land. This was about truth, about standing firm when someone tries to erase what's yours with the stroke of a pen or the jab of a finger. So, if you've ever had someone try to take what's rightfully yours, if you've ever faced a bully hiding behind rules and paperwork, then you already know the weight of that silence I held on my dock. You know the ache of watching someone threaten your peace. What came next was a battle not of fists, but of proof, not of shouting, but of quiet, steady resolve. And as the sun set on that day, I knew the fight for my home had just begun. The morning after Karen's so-called friendly warning, the lake felt different. The air was sharp, the mist low, the kind of stillness that whispers something is about to happen. I held my coffee the way my grandfather used to, black and hot, steam curling into the cool air. He had taught me this ritual: stand by the water first thing in the morning and just listen. He said the lake speaks, not with words, but with the way the air feels, the way the trees stand, the way ripples move across the surface. That morning, the lake didn't sound like peace. It sounded like a warning. I took the trail down to the dock, the same trail I had walked since childhood. I could still picture myself as a boy, chasing my grandfather's long strides, watching him carry a fishing rod in one hand and a thermos in the other. He would stop every few steps, kneel down, and show me little signs. How a bent blade of grass could tell you someone had walked here before, or how a nail hammered in the wrong place could outlive the person who drove it. He always said, "The ground remembers, Caleb, always." That memory hit me hard as I froze in place. Right there on the path, half hidden under pine needles, were roofing nails scattered like seeds. Dozens of them. Their sharp points stuck up, waiting for a barefoot child or a dog's paw. They weren't dropped by accident. No, they had been placed, deliberately, cruelly. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with a cold, steady anger. Whoever had done this hadn't just come after me. They had come after anyone who walked this trail, neighbors, pets, children. This wasn't a disagreement anymore. It was a strike. For 20 minutes, I crouched on my hands and knees, dragging a magnetic sweeper through the dirt, listening to the metallic clicks as nails snapped onto it one by one. 50 of them. 50 chances to maim or scar. I bagged them, filmed the sweep with a timestamp, and slipped on gloves so no fingerprints could be smudged. My grandfather's voice echoed again. Always collect the evidence. Caleb, the truth has to be carried, not just spoken. When I reached the dock, the smell hit me, acrid, chemical, the sharp sting of bleach. My boots squeaked on the damp boards, pale streaks running across the wood where the stain had been stripped away. Someone had poured bleach over the dock, enough to discolor the boards and drip into the lake. It wasn't just vandalism. It was sabotage. Make the dock slick, dangerous, maybe even collapse the wood if the damage spread. Worse than that, they had poisoned the water itself. For me, it wasn't just property. It was an attack on the very heart of what I loved most. Then I heard it. A faint buzzing overhead. My eyes shot up to find a drone hovering over the cove, its camera blinking red. It tilted, circled, almost taunting me as if to say, "We're watching. We know where you are." I filmed it, catching both the drone and the no trespassing. No drones over property line sign posted on my fence. Within seconds, the drone jerked and zipped back toward the HOA trail. My hands clenched around my phone. This wasn't just a prank. This was surveillance intimidation. They wanted me to know they could reach me anywhere. That's when I called her, Dana Ruiz, the county game warden. She was sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who didn't flinch at standing in court against polluters or poachers twice her size. Pollution was her line in the sand, and bleach in the lake crossed it. When I told her about the nails, the dock, and the drone, she didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. Her voice was steady, but I caught the edge of anger under it. "Don't touch anything else." While I waited, I kept walking, scanning the ground. That's when I saw it, the thing that made my stomach drop. Hammered into the dirt, maybe 10 feet from the water's edge, was a new survey pin, a piece of rebar topped with a bright orange cap. It stood exactly where Karen had pointed the day before when she claimed the boundary had shifted. For a long second, I just stared. My grandfather had shown me the real markers years ago, the heavy iron axle buried by the oak, the granite post on the far side of the cove. They were weathered, solid, permanent. But this was shiny, clean, new. No rust, no settling of the soil around it. It screamed fraud. It was Karen's proof, her fabricated weapon, planted under cover of night to back her lie. When Dana pulled up in her truck, her boots crunching the gravel, I felt a strange relief. I wasn't alone anymore. She walked the dock, sniffed the bleach, collected water samples, and shook her head at the bag of nails I handed her. "This is garbage," she muttered. "Amateur intimidation." "But that—" She pointed at the fake pin. "That's the real crime. That's fraud," I nodded. "We need a surveyor to document it." I knew exactly who to call. Evan Pike had been at my barbecue, laughing and telling stories. But this time I needed him not as a family friend, but as the professional he was, a licensed surveyor whose seal carried weight in any courtroom. When he arrived an hour later, his old truck rattling up the drive, I felt the first spark of control returning. His beard was gray, his hands steady, his eyes sharp as ever. He walked the scene like a hunter circling prey, crouching over the fake pin with a magnifying glass, studying the hammer marks, the soil, the shiny cap. "Amateur," he grunted finally. "Soil's loose. No license number on the cap. State requires that. This thing was put in last night. Junk on a stick, Caleb. That's all it is." He flipped through his old field book, pages soft from decades of use. "August 1998, he said, tapping a note. "Reshot this line with your granddad. Found the axle, found the granite post, tied it all to the county grid. Rock solid." He looked at me then, his expression serious. "This isn't just a mistake. It's fraud. Filing a false monument like this is a felony. And this is where the story twists. What started as a cookout argument was about to turn into a criminal case. We laid the evidence, out like puzzle pieces. Dana's water samples, Evan's field notes, my videos, the bag of nails. But one piece was still missing. We hadn't caught anyone in the act. Fraud was one thing. Proof of who swung the hammer was another. "They'll come back," I said quietly. "They planted the pin. They'll need to use it, run a line, mark trees, something. And when they do, we'll be waiting." Nate, standing in the doorway, crossed his arms. He didn't even ask. He just said, "So we set up, we watch." That night we did. Nate and I tucked ourselves into the rhododendrons 50 yards from the fake pin. He had a thermal monocular. I had night vision goggles. Evan stayed in the house, watching the feeds from my infrared trail cameras. The moon was a sliver. Every sound seemed louder. The slap of a wave, the cry of a loon, the rustle of something small in the underbrush. As the hours dragged on, my mind drifted back to my grandfather again. He had believed in clear lines, in honesty, in confronting a man face to face. He wouldn't have liked this, waiting in the dark, hiding like shadows. But I wasn't fighting the kind of man he used to face. Karen Lawson wasn't honest. She was a schemer. She sent others to do her dirty work. So I had to meet her game with mine. At around 2 a.m., Evan's whisper crackled in my ear through the radio. Movement. One person. Coming down the trail. The world snapped into focus. I raised my night vision goggles. A thick-set man in dark clothes crept through the trees. He wasn't skilled. He stumbled, snapped a twig, moved with nervous energy. I recognized him. Rob Hale, Karen's handyman, her fixer. Rob knelt by the fake pin, pulling a ball of yellow string from his bag, along with spray paint and a hammer. He tied the string and began walking toward my dock, dragging it behind him. The plan was clear. He'd mark a fake line through my property, make it visible, undeniable to anyone who saw it. I felt my anger rise, hot and sharp. This was my home, my legacy, and here was a man trespassing in the dead of night, hammer in hand, ready to carve away a piece of it. Nate's hand gripped my arm. "Wait," he whispered. Let him commit. He was right. We needed more than presence. We needed proof. Rob reached the dock, hammer raised, ready to drive a nail and tie off the string. That's when we moved, not rushing, not shouting. Just stepping silently out of the shadows until we were 15 feet away. "That's far enough, Rob," I said. He flinched, eyes wide. "Karen said quick in, quick out," he stammered. His voice cracked with panic. The hammer hung halfway up. For a second, he froze. Then his fear turned to a clumsy swing, a wide arc meant to scare us off. But Nate moved like lightning, deflecting, twisting, locking Rob's arm behind his back. The hammer clattered to the boards. In less than 3 seconds, it was over. And just like that, the truth came crashing into the open, caught red-handed under the cover of darkness. I called 911 calmly, giving my name and address. By the time deputies arrived, Rob was cuffed, evidence bagged, and his yellow string still stretched across my lawn like a mocking scar. Dana showed up too, shaking her head at the stupidity of it all. The next morning, fog clung low over the lake, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Evan returned with his transit, Deputy Miller by his side, to run the true boundary line. From the iron axle by the oak to the granite post across the cove, the line ran steady and true, 30 feet behind my picnic table, exactly where it had always been. Then we stretched Rob's fraudulent yellow string, cutting through my yard, slicing past my porch, ending at my dock. The contrast was undeniable. Deputy Miller scribbled furiously. Dana snapped photos. Evan tapped his map. "This isn't a boundary dispute," he declared. "This is a crime scene. And here's the question you'll be asking yourself. If someone is willing to lie this boldly, how far will they go when they start losing control?" That question didn't stay unanswered for long, because 2 days later, at the HOA meeting, Karen Lawson wasn't just defensive. She was cornered. And cornered people don't surrender quietly. She had a new plan, one that would drag her whole neighborhood down with her, and that was when the fight for truth turned into a fight for justice. 2 days later, I walked into the community clubhouse with a file under my arm and a storm pressing against my chest. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old carpet, the kind of stale air that clings to small-town politics. 30 residents sat scattered in folding chairs, their murmurs dying down as the HOA board members took their seats. At the center, flanked by her allies, sat Karen Lawson. Her posture was perfect, her hands folded neatly over a stack of papers, her face composed in that familiar mask of superiority. I wasn't afraid of her, not anymore. What rattled me was the weight of what I carried. The photos, the videos, the emails slipped into my hands by a neighbor too afraid to speak out loud. For days I had stared at them, wondering if I should keep pushing or let it all go. A voice inside me whispered that this fight wasn't just about land anymore. It was about pride, power, and the cost of standing up when everyone else stayed silent. As the meeting began, Karen's voice rang out crisp and commanding. She moved through the agenda with the efficiency of a general giving orders. When she reached the line about community property concerns, she looked up and smiled with a cold politeness. "Next we have Mr. Caleb Morgan," she announced, her tone dripping with condescension. "He seems to believe there is a boundary issue worth discussing." The room shifted, all eyes landing on me. I stood, feeling the file in my hand like a weight that could either set me free or destroy me. My throat tightened, but I steadied myself. I set up the small projector I had brought, the kind of risky move that could either silence the lies or make me the fool. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm. "I'm not here tonight to argue. I'm here to show you facts." The first slide appeared. A black and white copy of the 1946 survey plat, the deed my grandfather had held with pride. I explained in simple terms how the property lines were established, recorded, and fixed in stone. My voice stayed steady, but my chest burned with the fear that none of this would matter. Facts don't always win against authority, especially when that authority feeds on intimidation. Then I showed the photo of the nails scattered across my trail. Gasps rippled through the room. A woman near the back pulled her sweater tighter, whispering to her neighbor. Next came the photo of my bleached dock, the streaks glowing pale against the dark wood. A man in the front row shook his head in disbelief. Finally, I put up the close-up photo of the fraudulent survey pin, its orange cap shining under the camera's flash. "This was planted on my land," I said. "Not found. Not inherited, planted. It's a lie in steel and plastic." Karen's mask slipped just enough for me to see the anger beneath. "Mr. Morgan, these are baseless accusations. The HOA has consulted experts." I cut her off. "Not experts. A handyman." Her face tightened. "You have no right." "Oh, I have every right," I said, my voice sharp now. "And I have more." I clicked the next slide. The screen lit up with the green glow of infrared footage. Rob Hale, her handyman, creeping through the trees, hammer in hand, string trailing behind him. The room erupted. Murmurs, shouts, disbelief. A man in the back stood up suddenly. "That's Rob. That's my handyman." His voice cracked with shock. "Karen, you told us he was marking trees for beetles." The room buzzed, the air hot with anger. People turned on each other, whispering accusations, their voices rising. And here's where the room changed. Neighbors who once stayed silent now saw the truth for themselves. And silence was no longer an option. Karen tried to regain control, slamming her hand on the table. "This footage is inadmissible." "It's private security. This man is trespassing on HOA business." But I wasn't done. I pulled out the envelope of emails and placed them on the projector. One by one, the words glowed on the wall. "Rob, we need to establish a new marker for the boundary project. Place it 10 FT from the high water line. We'll claim avulsion, gasps, murmurs, another email. Another instruction. Another lie. "This is your president," I said, pointing at Karen, "running a criminal conspiracy in your name, with your money, not a dispute. A fraud." Her face flushed deep red, but her eyes stayed locked on me, burning with fury. The board shifted uncomfortably. Some stared at the floor. Others looked at Karen with open fear. The crowd, once restless, now seethed with betrayal. But even as the walls closed in on her, I felt something break inside me. Part of me wanted to push further, to expose her completely. Another part hesitated. Was I becoming like her, using humiliation as a weapon? I could almost hear my grandfather's voice warning me, "Don't lose yourself in the fight." Caleb, winning means nothing if you become what you're fighting. That doubt gnawed at me, even as I packed up my projector and walked out of the room. Behind me, Karen's empire was crumbling, but inside I carried no joy, only the weight of what came next. The next morning, Deputy Miller called. The emails had been verified, the warrant signed. He told me they were moving forward with a search of Karen's house. I hung up the phone, staring at the lake through my window. My hands shook slightly. This was it. No going back. I thought about the neighborhood, the people who trusted her, even the ones who had turned a blind eye. I wondered if they saw me as a hero or a man who tore his community apart. Later that day, I watched from my porch as 2 sheriff's cars pulled quietly into Karen's driveway. No sirens, no shouting. Just calm, efficient law. I imagined the knock on her door, the look on her face when they walked into her home, the kingdom she had ruled with fear. They would take her computer, her phone, her records. Piece by piece, they would dismantle her power, but as satisfying as it should have been, it didn't feel like victory. I felt a strange pity, even guilt. Karen was wrong, cruel, manipulative, but she was also human. Somewhere in her story there must have been a reason, a root, a choice made years ago that turned her into this. That thought unsettled me more than her clipboard ever had, because here's the truth nobody tells you. Sometimes the real battle isn't against your enemy. It's against the part of yourself that starts to look like them. Dana stopped by that evening, her uniform dusty, her eyes tired. She leaned on the railing of my porch, looking out over the water. "All this for a few feet of shoreline," she said quietly. "Some people's greed is bottomless." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched the ripples spreading across the lake, remembering my grandfather's words. The line is the line. Maybe it was never about the land, I said finally. Maybe it was about control. About proving she could bend the world to her will. Dana glanced at me, her gaze sharp. "And what about you, Caleb? What are you trying to prove?" Her question cut deep. What was I proving? That I could fight? That I could stand my ground? Or was I proving to myself that I hadn't let my grandfather down? The thought lingered long after she left. That night, Nate came over with 2 beers. We sat on the dock, the bleach stains still faintly visible, scars of the battle. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice low. "You protected your home." "Did I?" I asked. "Or did I just throw gasoline on a fire that's going to burn everyone around me?" He looked at me steadily. "Sometimes doing the right thing feels wrong. That doesn't make it any less right." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let those words settle into my bones like truth. But part of me wondered if Karen's downfall would take more than just her with it. Days later, news spread that Karen had been removed as president. The board voted unanimously, desperate to save face. They froze her legal funding, canceled Rob Hale's invoice, and pledged cooperation with the sheriff's office. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip, relief, and outrage. Some looked at me with gratitude. Others avoided my eyes as if I had dragged them into something they didn't want to see. But the story wasn't finished, because Karen wasn't finished. Late one night, long after the neighborhood had gone quiet, I sat on my porch listening to the hum of crickets. That's when I saw the shadow. A figure moving slowly along the trail by the lake. Too far to recognize, but close enough to stir every nerve in my body. My hand tightened on my phone. The figure paused near the oak tree, the old marker my grandfather had shown me 100 times. For a moment, they just stood there, head bowed, as if in silent defiance or prayer. Then they moved on, disappearing into the dark. My pulse hammered in my ears. The message was clear. The fight wasn't over, and that's the danger of a cornered enemy. They stop playing by the rules, and that's when the real chaos begins. I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake staring at the water, waiting for the next strike. Because one thing was certain now, Karen Lawson might have lost her title, but she hadn't lost her hunger. And when hunger meets desperation, the consequences can shake an entire community. The night after I saw that shadow by the oak tree, the air around the lake felt heavier than usual, as if the water itself was holding its breath. Every creak of the dock, every rustle of the pine set my nerves on edge. For weeks, this battle had been escalating. Nails on my trail, bleach on my dock, a fake pin hammered into the dirt. But this was different. This felt personal, a reminder that Karen Lawson wasn't finished. Stripped of her title, cornered by evidence, she was more dangerous now than ever. The next morning, Deputy Miller came by with news that chilled me. "Caleb," he said, "Karen's lawyer is filing motions claiming harassment. She's saying you manipulated evidence, doctored video, and intimidated her employee into trespassing." He rubbed his temples. "It's flimsy, but it'll buy her time. And time means she can stir trouble." My stomach tightened. This wasn't just about truth anymore. This was about endurance, about who could survive the longest under pressure. I thought of my grandfather again, of the times he'd told me, a man's line isn't just where the surveyor drew it. It's where he decides he won't back down. That line had been crossed. I met Nate at the dock that afternoon. He stood silently, staring at the bleach stains, his jaw set. "She's not going to quit," he said. "She's already lost everything. That makes her unpredictable." He turned toward me, his eyes sharp. "So what's your move?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to take it all to court, let the system crush her. But another part, the tired, bitter part, wanted to confront her myself, end it face to face. That thought scared me, because it wasn't about justice anymore. It was about anger. That night, sleep didn't come. I replayed every moment in my head. Karen's smirk on the 4th of July, the nails hidden in the dirt, Rob's hammer raised at my dock. Each memory felt heavier than the last. I questioned myself, was I fighting to protect my home or to prove I couldn't be beaten? And that's the question that eats at you in the dark. Are you defending what's yours, or are you becoming the very thing you swore to stand against? 2 days later, the decision was forced on me. I came home from town to find a letter nailed to my porch. The envelope was blank, but inside was a printed note. "The board isn't done. You'll regret this." My hands trembled as I read it. It wasn't just intimidation, it was escalation. She wasn't hiding anymore. I called Dana. She arrived within the hour, her face tight with frustration. "She's playing with fire," Dana said. "This crosses into threats. We can push for stronger charges." She studied me carefully. "But it'll get ugly. Once this line is crossed, there's no turning back." I looked out at the lake, at the oak tree standing firm against the wind. My grandfather's voice echoed again. "The line is the line." I realized then that this wasn't just about Karen. It was about me. If I backed down now, I'd carry that shadow for the rest of my life. So I made the choice. I told Dana to move forward with everything we had. No more waiting. No more hoping she'd stop. We would drag it all into the open, no matter the cost. The fallout came fast. That week, the sheriff's office executed another warrant. Computers, phones, paper files, all seized from Karen's home. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Some neighbors thanked me quietly. Others avoided my eyes, muttering about how the community would never be the same. I carried their judgment like stones in my pocket. One evening, as I walked the trail by the lake, Evan joined me. He was quiet, his hands tucked in his jacket. "Caleb," he said softly, "I've known your family a long time. Your grandfather fought battles too." But he always asked himself one question: what's the cost of winning? His words sank into me like cold water. I wanted to answer, but I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't know anymore. Because here's the thing. Sometimes victory feels less like triumph, and more like a slow unraveling of everything you thought you were. That unraveling came to a head at the next HOA emergency session. The board gathered in a tense room, Karen sitting stiffly in the corner, her lawyer whispering in her ear. I was there with my folder, Dana beside me, Deputy Miller observing. The tension was suffocating. When I presented the latest evidence, emails tying Karen directly to Rob's actions, invoices stamped with her approval, the room turned electric. Board members shifted, residents muttered. One finally stood, his face pale. "Karen," he said, "did you really do this?" For the first time, she faltered. Her eyes darted, her voice cracked. I was trying to protect the community. I thought—" Her words were cut off by another resident. "You lied to us. You put us all at risk." The room erupted, voices rising, accusations flying. Karen's mask shattered. She slammed her hand on the table, her voice shrill. "You don't understand. He was encroaching. He was stealing what was ours." Her outburst silenced the room, but in that silence, the truth was undeniable. She hadn't been protecting anyone. She had been protecting herself, her control, her pride, and yet, as I watched her crumble, I felt no victory. Only exhaustion. Only the heavy realization that this fight had scarred more than just property lines. It had scarred people, trust, community. That night, as I sat alone on my porch, staring at the granite marker Evan and I had reset, I felt the full weight of what was coming. Karen was cornered, but not defeated. People like her don't vanish quietly. They lash out, and when they do, they take as much as they can down with them. And this is the turning point, the moment where the fight stops being about land and becomes a battle for survival, where one wrong move could cost everything. The air around the lake was heavy again, thick with the sense that something irreversible had been set in motion. I had made my choice, and there was no undoing it, but deep down, I knew the darkest moment was still ahead, because Karen Lawson wasn't finished, and the next move she made would push us all past a line we could never come back from. The whispers spread faster than wildfire. By the time the weekend arrived, it seemed everyone around the lake had their version of what happened that night. Some said I had banged on Karen's door, shouting threats. Others claimed I'd prowled her yard, flashlight in hand, looking for a fight. It didn't matter that none of it was true. Rumor had already made me guilty. For the first time in this war, I felt like I was losing control of my own story. The HOA board called an emergency vote. Word traveled through phone trees and porch conversations, neighbors gathering in the clubhouse like it was a town hall of old. I walked in with my head high, though inside my stomach twisted. Evan walked beside me, his shoulders sagging from weeks of being under Karen's attacks. Dana was there too, her badge tucked away, but her presence giving me a sliver of strength. Nate stayed in the back, his face unreadable. Karen sat at the center, her lawyer at her side. For a woman cornered by evidence and stripped of her presidency, she still looked like she was in command. That was her power, the ability to twist any room to her advantage. When the meeting started, her lawyer rose and wasted no time. "This man," he said, pointing straight at me, "has stalked, harassed, and manipulated this community." He doctored evidence, spread lies, and even attempted to intimidate my client at her own home. "This is not a homeowner defending his property. This is a bully weaponizing fear." Murmurs rippled across the room. My throat tightened, but I stood. You've all seen the photos. The emails, the video of Rob planting that pin. That wasn't fear-mongering, that was proof. Proof of fraud. Proof of a plan to steal what was mine. Karen suddenly stood, her voice sharp as broken glass. Your land? You've poisoned this neighborhood with your paranoia. You've turned friends against friends, all for a strip of shoreline. You're destroying this community! The words hit me harder than I expected, because part of me feared she was right. Maybe this battle had changed me, hardened me, pulled me away from the man I thought I was. My voice wavered when I answered. I never wanted this. I only wanted the truth, and here's the hardest truth. You can fight for what's right and still wonder if the fight itself is breaking you. The room turned into a storm of arguments, neighbors yelling, the board pounding the table for order. In the chaos, Evan rose shakily. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. I've been marking these lines since 1946. I stood with Caleb's grandfather when this land was first recorded. I know where the truth lies. He held up the original survey, his hands trembling but steady in conviction. And no lie, no intimidation can change the line. For a brief moment, the room fell silent. People stared at the old map, at Evan's weathered face, and something shifted. Doubt gave way to memory, to respect. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the board waved him down. Then it happened. Karen snapped. She slammed her hand on the table and shouted, That land is mine! It belongs to this community. Not him, not his dead grandfather, not anyone. Her voice cracked with rage, her mask finally gone. The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. Every neighbor, every board member, every friend-turned-stranger stared at her as the truth of her obsession spilled out. She wasn't protecting the community. She was protecting her control. The board president, a man who had once followed her lead without question, finally spoke. Karen, this is over. You've lied, you've endangered residents, and you've betrayed this community. Effective immediately, you are removed permanently. Karen's face drained of color. She looked around, but no one came to her defense, not even Nate. For the first time, she looked small, defeated. But victory didn't taste sweet. It tasted bitter, heavy. Because as the board voted, as the sheriff confirmed charges would follow, I looked at Nate. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. He walked out before the meeting ended, and I knew our friendship would never be the same. That night, the weight of it all settled on me. I sat on the dock, the water lapping softly against the wood. Evan's words echoed in my mind. The line is the line, my grandfather's line, my line. It was safe now, secured in law and in truth. But what had it cost? Dana joined me, her boots crunching on the boards. She didn't say much, just sat beside me, letting the silence speak. After a while, she said, You did it. You protected what was yours. I nodded, but my chest felt hollow. Protecting what's yours doesn't always feel like winning. Sometimes it feels like standing among ruins, because even when you win the war, you're left with the question, what part of yourself didn't survive the battle? In the weeks that followed, Karen's house went dark. Some said she left town, others claimed she was fighting charges in court. The HOA scrambled to rebuild trust. Neighbors tried to mend fences, but the air around the lake was different now. We all felt it. Something had broken, and no meeting or vote could fully repair it. One evening, as I walked the trail, I saw the oak tree swaying in the wind. The same tree my grandfather once pointed to, the marker of truth. I placed my hand on its rough bark, grounding myself. For a moment I felt peace. But then, from the corner of my eye, I spotted something glinting near the roots. I crouched down. Buried halfway in the dirt was another pin, not one of Evan's old markers. A new one, fresh, bright, recently placed. My stomach turned cold. Someone had been here. Someone still wanted to redraw the line. I yanked it out of the earth and stared at it, heart pounding. If Karen was gone, who had put this here? Rob, another board member? Or was it someone I never suspected, someone still hiding in plain sight? The fight was supposed to be over, but in that moment, holding the steel pin in my hand, I realized the battle had only shifted. The enemy wasn't just Karen anymore. It was something larger: greed, control, the hunger that lives in people who think they can take what isn't theirs. And the scariest thought of all was that it might not end with me, because sometimes the story doesn't finish with the villain's defeat. It finishes with the haunting truth that the fight will come again, and you might not be ready when it does. I stood by the oak tree until the sky turned dark, the pin cold in my hand. I thought about Karen, about Nate, about the cost of holding the line, and I understood something I hadn't before. The battle for land was never really about land. It was about who we are when everything is threatened. The conflict was resolved, at least on paper. The board had turned against Karen, the law was moving forward, and the line was safe. But the emotional truth, the one that hung heavy in the air, was that no victory comes without scars. And as I walked back to my dock, I knew this story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a warning, a reminder, that when people fight for control, they rarely stop with just one loss. They always come back. The night swallowed the lake in silence, and for the first time I wondered if peace was just another illusion, something you hold for a moment before it slips away again. The pin I pulled from the roots of the oak tree stayed on my desk for weeks, cold metal against the wood surface, mocking me every time I passed. It wasn't just a piece of steel. It was a reminder that even when one battle ends, there's always another waiting to start. It sat there like an unanswered question, one I didn't want to face but couldn't ignore. The neighborhood grew quieter in the months that followed. Karen's house stayed dark, her blinds drawn, her driveway empty. Some said she was gone for good, others swore she'd be back once the charges played out. Either way, the shadow she cast still lingered over every cookout, every casual walk along the lake. People avoided talking about her directly, but you could feel it in the air. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Friendships that had once felt steady now carried cracks too wide to ignore. Nate stopped coming around. We never fought outright, never had a final blow-up. But after his confession about Karen reaching out to him, things were never the same. I still don't know if he told her something he shouldn't have or if he just got caught in her net like so many others. What I do know is that trust, once broken, doesn't heal the same. I'd look across the water at his house and feel both gratitude for what we'd shared and grief for what was lost. Evan weathered his storm, though not without cost. The complaint against his license was dropped, but the stress aged him. He told me one evening, standing under the oak tree, that it would be his last survey. "I've fought long enough," he said, his hand brushing the bark. "The land will outlive us all, Caleb, but a man has to know when to put down his tools." There was pride in his voice, but sorrow too. Watching him walk away that night, I realized some endings aren't caused by defeat. They're simply the toll time collects. Dana kept in touch, though her visits grew less frequent. The law moved at its own pace, slow and grinding, and she reminded me not to expect clean endings. "Justice isn't a straight line," she said once. "It bends, it stalls, sometimes it barely moves. But you keep pushing anyway." I didn't always believe her, but I respected her for saying it. As for me, the dock was repaired, the trail cleared of nails, the bleach stains slowly fading under new coats of sealant. But peace didn't return the way I thought it would. Every time I heard a branch snap in the woods, I wondered if someone was back to mark my land. Every time a drone buzzed in the distance, my chest tightened. That's the hidden cost of battles like these. They leave scars you can't always see. One summer evening, as the sun sank low and painted the water in gold, I sat on the dock with my son. He asked me why people fight over land, why neighbors turn on each other when there's enough space for everyone. I didn't have an easy answer. I told him what my grandfather told me. The line is the line. It's not just dirt or water. It's about knowing who you are, where you stand, and what you won't let anyone take away. He nodded, not fully understanding, but holding on to the words anyway. And I realized then that this fight wasn't only mine. It was a story he'd carry forward. A memory of what happens when someone tries to erase what belongs to you. Maybe one day he'd tell his children the same thing. The oak tree still stands, roots deep in the earth, branches stretching toward the sky. It has outlasted my grandfather, and one day it will outlast me. I find comfort in that. Because even as people argue, deceive, and betray, the land remains. Silent, steady, waiting. Sometimes at night, when the lake is calm and the moonlight dances across the water, I think about Karen. I wonder if she ever lies awake replaying everything, if she feels the weight of what she tried to do, or if she convinces herself she was right until the end. I'll probably never know, but I've learned not every question needs an answer. Some stories end with silence, and yet I can't shake the image of that fresh survey pin I found near the oak. Someone put it there. Someone wanted to redraw the line even after Karen was gone. That's the part that lingers. Not fear exactly, but awareness. That greed, once awakened, doesn't die. It just waits for another chance. Maybe that's the final cost of all this. Not just what I lost in friendships, in trust, in quiet nights by the water. The cost is knowing there will always be someone who looks at what you've built and thinks they can claim it for themselves. That's the truth I've had to learn the hard way. But here's what I also know. The line held. My land remained mine. And though it came with scars, with broken ties and sleepless nights, I didn't let them take it. I proved that even against pressure, against lies, against neighbors turned enemies, you can stand firm. That's what stays with me most. Not the anger, not the rumors, not even Karen's downfall. What stays is the image of that oak tree, unshaken, its roots tangled deep in the soil of generations. A symbol of resilience, of truth that doesn't bend to lies. So maybe peace isn't about silence. Maybe peace is about endurance, about carrying the scars but still holding your ground, about knowing that when someone comes for what's yours, you don't let them rewrite your story. And if you've ever faced something like this, someone trying to take what's yours, someone twisting the truth until it nearly breaks you, then you already know. You already understand the cost and the strength it takes to fight. The story is finished now, but the lesson isn't. The lake is still here. The oak still stands. And so do I. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a comment for my channel HOA Truth Tales. I want to hear your stories too. The battles you've faced, the lines you've held, the scars that still remind you of what's worth protecting. Because together, our voices matter. The night falls soft across the water and the oak sways gently in the breeze. That's where I'll leave it, with the image of roots holding firm, branches reaching higher, and a line that will never move.